Hello and welcome at Book Lovers Companion. My name is Edith and no chattering teacup next to me. She is cooking the books or something like that. Our dear CEO is lending a helping paw or taking another horizontal life pause. Who knows these days? But here with me is from across the pond, author Jarret Keene. Hello, Jarret, and welcome at Book Lovers Companion.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. Yes, across the pond and trapped in the desert of Las Vegas.
And that's where I went when I read your books. You took me to the desert, to Las Vegas. In your book, Hammer of the Dogs, what can you tell our listeners about this book? Without giving too much away, of course.
Right. Well, Hammer of the Dogs is what I call a literary adventure novel. More specifically, it's set in the wasteland of a dystopian Las Vegas. And it's really a high-octane fun. It's a story that stars a 21-year-old Lash, who has some high-tech skills. She's a drone slayer, a weapons mistress. And she's helping to shield the Las Vegas Valley's survivors and to protect her younger classmates at a paramilitary school that's set up shop there in the Luxor Hotel Casino on the Las Vegas Strip. And she's getting ready to graduate. And pretty soon she'll be alone in fending off the deadly intentions and desires of the school's most powerful enemies, specifically the enemy warlord Richter, who has his own army, his own mercenaries set up in a different hotel on the Strip called City Center. And much to her dismay, she's captured by Richter, and she's surprised by two things. Richter is not the monster her headmaster has told her he is. And the one thing that she finds it difficult to protect is her own heart, her own emotions for this dangerous man. And so it's really a novel about a character who starts out deeply flawed, deeply angry, and this character, Lash, has to learn how to become a leader and how to better navigate a world that is more complex than she's been made to believe. And so Hammer of the Dogs is really, despite all the many action sequences, set pieces, for me, it's a story of maturation and wit.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have to apologize to my guest because it seems to me my camera froze again on me. It did work yesterday for our live stream, but it seems to. Sorry about that. But you can still hear me. Oh, dear me. Technology, a pain.
Yes.
If it's not working, sorry about that. And at least
That's
I don't.
What Hammer of the Dog. Technology. The
exactly.
agony of technology.
At least I did not freeze with my mouth wide open. So, yeah. But you said it's this wasteland and it's dystopian. Do you think, because that's something my guest yesterday mentioned, dystopian novels, this dystopian idea has run its course by now, or will it run its course, or not yet? Because that's what she thinks. Or do we need more utopia?
Well, I wrote a dystopian novel because I had yet to read a dystopian story that did the things I wanted it to do, satisfied the itch that I wanted to scratch. So for me, the novel Hammer of the Dogs is in some ways a critique of the dystopian novel and an effort to sort of bring it back, if you will, to its origins, to its roots. And I'm talking specifically about novels like Damnation Alley, or you could even really say, movies, movies like Escape from New York, these kinds of incredible 80s entertainments that my generation grew up, enjoying, everything from Red Dawn to Blade Runner to Brazil. These are classic cinematic stories. And I certainly set out to emulate that harder, aggressive, darker style of the dystopia that I feel has been leached out of the category, the genre, for various reasons. The main reason being the marketing. young adult literature. The term YA to me is simply a tag, a marketing term. It's I think had maybe a bad influence on the writing and the enjoyment of these stories. I sought to return the dystopian novel to its aggressive, you might even say primitive roots. Books like Stephen King's, The Long Walk, and maybe even to a degree Philip K. Dick's, Paranoid Adventures.
Yeah.
Everything from Valis to Ubik. These are great books, and I wanted to pay tribute to them and kind of maybe steer the dystopian story more into that direction. You might even call it retro future shock.
Yeah.
Really after with Hammer of the Dogs. I want to please not just contemporary readers of the genre, but also, millennials, Gen Xers, even boomers. I think there's a lot to be done with the genre.
I agree. But I also got the impression that you said YA, and it's maybe wrongfully applied, that in this part of the fantasy or sci-fi genre, that when people write for young adults, there is more, sometimes it feels like that, more interesting ideas than when we talk about writing for adults.
Yes, well, I certainly agree with that. If you read a book like, for example, Hunger Games or The Maze Runner, my sons, who are teenagers, very, within the last few years, have read those books and enjoyed them immensely. If you visit and spend time with these books, you'll see that a lot of what they're about, from my perspective, seems to be about, adolescent anxieties, fears, and how, the competitive educational landscape becomes its own minefield and its own danger zone, its own danger room.
Yeah.
In the same way that the X-Men, those mutants from the Marvel universe, are trained to near exhaustion, in an effort to take on the very adult task of protecting the world from evil. That's it's about as anxious a situation as you can imagine.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's why these books are so successful and so enjoyable. That said, I do see, from my perspective, what I've read, that genre becoming a little bit, it's stretched thin. That anxiety can only be mined so far. And with Hammer of the Dogs, I was seeking to add even more near future technology into the mix and add that layer of anxiety into the dystopian storyline. And let's face it, kids today have a lot to be anxious about with regard to AI, Chat GPT, deep fakes, drones. These are all things that are immediately on the horizon, and they are coming, and I don't think it will be very pretty. And Lash lives in a world where it is in fact quite ugly. So she's her way through that.
Oh, yeah. And you mentioned already those two factions that are fighting for dominance in this world where she lives. This also has got one of them more religious. It's not even an undertone, it's an overtone. The Academy. Did you find that because the United States tends to have a lot of, let's say, religious overtones?
Well, certainly. But what's scary is that this religious mania has leaked over into Silicon Valley, into the tech sector. And now we have, so-called atheist tech people proselytizing about the singularity, or uploading human consciousness into the cloud, into the machine. And having spent time at these drone conventions the last 10, 15 years, I'm talking about the drone conventions that gather annually, more than once a year in Las Vegas. You may not know this, but Las Vegas is a huge convention destination.
Yeah.
These tech people gather here and start talking about this stuff without irony. And they talk about it with a fervor and a mania that I found to be quite disturbing. And more disturbing than the religious mania of the tech atheist is the willingness of this type of person to jump immediately into bed with the military industrial complex, with the higher education complex, with the law enforcement. It's just the nexus of these movements are all wound up. It's just bound up together here in these conventions, and to see them working in harmony towards the same goal. Foreign governments looking to buy weapons to pacify their, populations, their citizens. It's truly disturbing, and that's the kind of you might call religious mania that I'm more concerned about than someone who believes in I don't know, Jesus Christ, coming back to
Oh yeah.
coming back to save the world. It's the tech people believe that the world can only be saved through the machine, and that's where a lot of my satire and critique comes in. Lash works for she's in a sense shackled by a headmaster who believes in the singularity and strives for a man-machine connection, aka the cyborg, and that's something Lash rejects. She does not want to bond with the machine. She wants to kill the machines.
And she has her questions or her doubts, doesn't she? Right at the beginning of the novel, we get the impression that she's not.
She's one of the older students. She remembered growing up in like what would have been the pre-disaster Catholic Church, and she when those things were separate, like the higher power and the higher machine were separate. But now they seem to be in this school that she's trapped in. They're fused, and this is very troubling to her. But she knows no other way, because at the same time she understands that her headmaster does much to help the Valley's survivors, but his belief system, or his ideology, she finds distasteful and maybe even destructive. So she's in a great position, in other words, to be seduced by this warlord who believes his beliefs are more in alignment with hers, which is that technology is merely a tool. It's not something that's going to save us. Only we can save ourselves. But the technology is something that can be used for good or for evil, and ultimately it comes down to who we are as people in order to enact true, serious, and humane change. And that's what's disturbing to her as well, because she feels caught between two opposing views.
Yeah, between the rock and the hard place. And what you just said about those tech companies and their willingness to work with the military and so on, because obviously for the money, to get enough money to finance their projects. I think you also mentioned it in your book. It was a short mention there. It reminds me of the film Terminator, because the idea that we use the machine and then the machine takes over because it realizes we humans are flawed. And you have to get rid of the flaw.
Yes. And some of us are all too eager to hand everything over to the machines, and I find that to be a bad idea. And so does Lash, so does Richter. And I'm not giving too much away. I mean, it's just that this is a story of someone having to make hard choices, but at the same time trying to retain her humanity. And you mentioned Terminator. Sarah Connor, the protagonist of that of that franchise, if you will, is a powerful influence. For me, that is the best science fiction adventure protagonist you could have. Or maybe it's a tie between Sarah Connor and Ellen Ripley from Aliens. But these are characters who stand in defiance of technology and of warmongering, and of psychopathic violence. They have to use violence in order to reject these bad ideas that are being, pushed upon them in a way that is ultimately apocalyptic.
Yeah.
To me, they're both post-apocalyptic stories. You
Yep.
can argue about Alien and all that, but they're stories in which technology has basically conquered humanity. And so now what?
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly. Also in Alien, although you said it's about aliens, but there is still this huge influence of this company that sends out Elle Ripley and her colleagues. And what happens in the first film? I mean, you have this cyborg. It turns out, oh, he does not have the best interest at heart. Oh, surprise! And it also reminds me what you said about the tech companies, and given that most of us have seen Terminator and probably Alien, what Stephen Hawking said before he died, he warned about the machines, or at least artificial intelligence. And hearing you say what you said, the man was so right.
Yes. And we're just on the cusp of it, we're on the brink of phenomenal change and evolution or de-evolution, whatever you want to call it. But it's felt like I felt like I needed to write this book now quickly and not wait around for my book to be outpaced or made irrelevant by the advances in technology. But to a point, I did rely on drone technology from 10 years ago, because I did want it to be a little bit, in a way, retro futurist. I didn't want to get too far ahead or too theoretical about drone technology. I wanted it to be a visceral, gut-wrenching read that focuses a lot on line of sight drones, rather than drone swarm or those weird robot dogs that you see in the news and on, Black Mirror. I wanted to do my own thing and have my own spin on it. So you'll notice that all of the drone tech in here is from drone convention brochure and catalogs that I pinched from these conferences, like 10 years ago in Las Vegas. I didn't seek to update or look beyond that. I wanted kind of like in my mind, this story takes place honestly like in the Obama administration. This is almost an alternate history novel. But I found that to be very fun and very liberating in some ways. I didn't have to like extrapolate too far, because everything that I had here was established and been around for years.
Yeah.
There was much to write about.
Yeah. I mean, it also is a little bit what you said, this loading up your conscience into the machine. There is another show which is very much in this sort of universe set. I would say Person of Interest is one of the shows that deals or plays with this idea, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. It's just funny how these shows kind of train us to almost accept these ideas, to just they're preparing us for the inevitable uploading of our consciousness, even if it doesn't work. I mean, would we know? I mean, just we'd pay some money up front, and with the idea that our brains are going to be uploaded to the singularity. We pay up front, and then when we expire, then with the understanding that the corporation is going to upload. But of course, there's no way to tell. We have no physical body to wield in order to confirm any of this. I don't know. It just seems like another scam.
Oh yeah. Making money. That's all it is about, isn't it? I mean, in the end, let's be honest and let's be realistic about that. Which also reminds me of this film with Steve Martin and Lily Tomlin, where he has to take care of her brain. You remember that?
Oh yeah. Wait, what is that called?
Can't remember the title, but it was that was at least funny.
Yeah. I know. I grew up with that film. Yeah. Why am I blanking on the name? I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, where she's this rich woman and she dies and he has to find the body for her brain. And that was a funny one. You said you wanted to emulate those darker authors. Is there one in particular you would say that has been or is your role model for writing this book? Or more than one?
As far as novels go?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would definitely say, well, this is going to sound weird, but Shane by Jack Schaefer, which is actually a Western, but it's, if you know this movie at all, Shane stars, a little kid who looks up to a dark stranger, enter Dark Stranger, a gunman who comes into town to put everything right, but his methods are terrifying. And of course he has a tragic and violent background. This was a novel that was assigned to young readers well into the 80s. It's kind of disappeared from high school, middle school curriculum. But these are the kind of books that my son went to school graduated from middle school recently. He read the book Hatchet, which is a survival novel. And I read that with him, and that was I believe a huge influence on Hammer of the Dogs, because in many ways Hammer of the Dogs is exactly that. It's a Western, but it's also a survival novel.
Okay.
And then I've put all this Stephen King grade science fiction stuff into it. I didn't really use I had read Hunger Games and Maze Runner and all that, but I didn't really find a Divergent. I love those, but I didn't find them to be influencing me during the writing of it. I kept looking deeper into the past for influences and literary fuel touchstones, if you will.
Did you also read the Japanese book that inspired Hunger Games?
Battle Royale.
Yeah,
I read that in the 90s when it was first translated and started, appearing on the shelves of, the Barnes and Noble bookstores here in the U.S. And that really cleared the sinuses. It was an astounding read. Looking back on it now, the translation probably wasn't as strong as the ones that came after it, but it for me it was the one of the great science fiction dystopian stories, and I certainly think that was maybe in some ways that book is the last hard-edged YA novel, prose novel, and I do appreciate and admire it immensely.
And why did you choose a female protagonist? Because of Sarah Connor and Ellen Ripley, or?
Yeah, I mean that's science fiction. Sarah Williams from Labyrinth. That's a fantasy novel, fantasy movie, but it's these cinematic heroines were, for me, they defined they were genre defining for me as a Gen X person.
Oh yeah, well,
even Princess Leia. People always make fun of the whatever the weird Jabba the Hutt bikini she was wearing, or whatever. But
strange, whatever that was.
Yeah. But if you actually watch the films, she is in control and is a complete badass heroine. This is that makes the movie great.
Yeah.
And you see it too in many of the Star Trek films. That's just how science fiction should go, I believe. I don't think science fiction really works that well if you have kind of a dopey adolescent boy working his way through these problems. It seemed to me that you needed that mix of stylishness and determination, and that's to me what defines Sarah Connor and Ellen Ripley and other science fiction heroines, I guess, woman heroes.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And even Harry Potter needed his Hermione, because where would he be without her?
Without a doubt. And I see it too in X-Men, Storm, Fantastic
Yeah.
Four, you have Invisible Woman.
Yeah.
They were always there to save pull everybody's butt out of the fire. And to me, that's how it's supposed to work. So
Mm. Mm.
that was dictated my, choice.
Absolutely understandable. And I agree with you. I mean, let's be honest, the 80s. Bad taste,
Yeah.
but still great.
Yes. I mean, I don't know. The 80s to me were very, in some ways, people make fun of the 80s as being shallow and surface, but there was a surprising number of progressive artistic choices that were made throughout that decade that I think we haven't really come to terms with. We've just kind of decided that science fiction has always been a boys' club, and I've never really seen it that.
I mean, yeah, I'm with you there. And let's be honest, the music was great in the 80s.
Yes, which is all through here. The 80s hard rock, heavy metal.
Absolutely.
All
And,
over the-
yeah, and even as you mentioned, Star Trek was way, way more, in a way, further ahead, because Gene Roddenberry was way much ahead of his time, and only the studio said no, because his number one would have been female.
Yes, exactly. And the other great thing about Roddenberry, is he grew up writing. Not grew up. He started his career with the writing of TV westerns. Like Hap Gun Will Travel, and he was always bringing something different to the table. I remember one episode of Have Gun Will Travel. He introduces the idea of a camel, in the desert Southwest, and I just thought that was so cool. But he was always pushing the envelope and trying to make something new and different. And it's Star Trek is shot through with those what I would only call like cool progressive, ideas and concepts that stand the test of time. And he's just really an icon of science fiction. Jack Kirby is another huge influence, the co-creator of the Marvel Universe with Stan Lee, artist responsible for most, if not all, of those incredible concepts and characters. He was always doing everything he could to, broaden the cast of characters and the concepts that they encountered. I'm always in awe of these incredible Imagineers. They're just amazing people, amazing artists.
Yeah. We spoke about it before I hit the record button, and we agreed that there are some genres that are underappreciated.
Yes.
And why is that? Why is that sci-fi and other genres are so underappreciated, or not taken seriously, or even looked down upon? What is it? Why? Why is that?
Well, I think, to be frank, it's too much imagination, too much, too much independence, too much, science fiction for me, and romance novels. They're about breaking out of one's limited environment, and there's a lot of agency in these books and in these stories and characters, and I think that's scary to a lot of people. I think that's why explains why the sociological novel or sociological sci-fi fantasy is more often critically acclaimed and embraced by the Academy. And I take a different tact as a professor here in Las Vegas. I'm trying to push fun back into the curriculum, back into the syllabus. Pleasure is something I take very seriously, and I believe in. The pleasure in reading, the love and enjoyment of reading. A lot of that is kind of beaten out of you when you go through a academic program here in the U.S. I don't know if it's the same in Europe, but I want to encourage my students to not just read books for pleasure, but also write their own stories for pleasure.
Yeah.
A good portion of my novel, Hammer of the Dogs, was written in conjunction with a undergraduate creative writing workshop. I wrote my novel as they were writing their novels and their short stories. Every week we'd bring in a chapter, and rather than peer review or critique or offer uninformed judgments about each other's work. We would simply show up and read the latest chapter, the latest short story, the latest poem of our books, and simply share the love of that, the passion, the pleasure. And I have to say that it was an incredible success. My students wrote more that semester than they had in any previous class that I taught, and it's because we had made it a no judgment zone, and if there was things that were obvious and glaring, we would we'd tell the student, tell each other what we should do to correct it. But it wasn't. We weren't there to like assess and push our agenda into each other's stories or poems or essays. We were there to celebrate and share in each other's creativity. And I think we have to bring. I mean, I don't think we should completely throw everything out that the Academy has innovated and brought into the field of literary studies. But I do believe we have to take a moment and reevaluate what we're doing and why we're doing it, and how we can incorporate more fun and more agency into what we do here in the English department, and not just here in Las Vegas, but everywhere. You have to. There's a real push to make everything ideological, and while I am in agreement with a lot of these ideas, I don't think it's not something we should be sermonizing or proselytizing. We should be instead teaching our students to be full of agency and imagination and creativity, and I just want to bring more positive energy into the endeavor. And I think Hammer of the Dogs, despite its dystopian storyline and dark prophecy of a AI-driven future, ultimately the good guys win because because they have ideas worth fighting for.
And do you think also, you mentioned that the ideas and so on, that people or the powers that be are afraid of genres like sci-fi and fantasy because authors who write it think outside the box too much for them, and they can't cope with that, and they don't bow to this limited things you are supposed to write about?
I do, and I think that's why to be honest, I struggled for at least a year in an effort to secure a literary agent. There's just I'd send my novel to these agents, and they'd come back saying the exact same thing, almost as if I was sending it to the same agent. Do this, do that, and then we can talk. But what they were asking me to do was to deform the book unnaturally, to mutilate the book to make it more like another book that I had already read. That book's already been done. Why do you want to mutilate my book to make it resemble something that we've already seen? So that's what led me to, send this book to a university press, which is quite ironic because I feel like I've published one of the very few science fiction novels to be peer reviewed by professors. For your listeners, if you don't know what peer review is in the Academy, it's like, you're academic, you create an article or a book or a book chapter, you send it to other professors to sign off on, to assess, to say, yay, this is good, or nay, this is terrible, don't publish it. And, the fact that I was able to get my novel peer reviewed by a university press and then published, to me is nothing short of remarkable. But I think it shows just it makes the point that I'm trying to make here, which is that commercial mainstream publishing might be creating problems for itself by insisting on a kind of cookie cutter method to science fiction and fantasy. When you and I both know that when we were growing up in the 80s and 90s, this genre was wide open. I mean, there was a complete range of stuff out there, and that has compressed to the point where it's like YA and really nothing, maybe some military science fiction or dark fantasy. But other than that, it's gotten really one-dimensional.
Yeah, and I think I'm afraid it's not just sci-fi or fantasy. You have to fit the mold as an author if you want to get published by a traditional publisher. I think that's also the reason why so many authors, especially what I hear from other guests in the United States who have been traditionally published, decide to go independent. And it's
Mhm.
not just about the money. I mean, it's one point. I mean, it's a good point, but still, it's not just that. It's you can, like we said, think outside the box. You can uh, make your own ideas real and get out there. Change genre, change whatever you like. You don't
Yes.
have to fit their idea of you as a writer.
Yes. And I'm so grateful for University of Nevada Press for taking on a project like this. And, it comes with some risk. I've done my best to kind of, put myself out there and
Yeah.
promote and push the book. But
Yeah.
to be frank with you, my students, my creative writing students, undergraduate students and graduate students, have sold more books than me by self-publishing through Amazon, and they've made more money than me. I mean, they've been doing it longer because this is my first science fiction novel,
Yeah.
but they have written, trilogies and and more, and they've sold a couple thousand, few thousand books, and made money and recouped their investment in the project and more. It's wonderful to see. But can you imagine, like, I'm teaching a creative writing workshop to students who have already sold thousands of copies of their self-published Amazon book. It's humbling to say the least, because
Yeah.
in the academy, a professor writes a book, the libraries buy it, and they sell it at best, a couple hundred copies to the libraries. But my students are out there hustling, writing their little tushes off, writing as fast as they can, and churning out these books in a way that is inspiring. They're just letting their imaginations flow, and not just Amazon. They've used in the past Wattpad or
Yeah.
Webtoons. They've used other platforms, and it's so inspiring to see my students in their 20s, using the technology in a way that Lash would love to see, which is using technology to make connections and to celebrate humanity and to basically reimagine a world that, let's face it, isn't as good as it could be.
Mm-hmm.
I find that to be inspiring.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And yet they're still willing to get better and get input from other people and learn in their craft. I mean, that's something that a lot of independent authors also say. They are always willing to learn.
Yes.
And that's also the reason why they are always so full of praise for their writing communities, where they get feedback, like you said, and help with their ideas, and not just, backstepping and stealing ideas, but just helping each other along.
Yes, and they help each other not just with the writing, but also with the marketing and the distribution. They bring each other's ideas. They bring ideas to each other in a way that is inspiring and makes more things happen for them. It opens more doors, and that's what writing should be about. It should be about expanding your community. I tell my students all the time, if you're not part of a writing community, whether it's journalism or fiction writing or even publicity marketing, digital media, you need to be part of a community that cares about communication.
Yeah,
and that's the best thing you can hope for, is to find people who want to help and you want to help.
Yeah, exactly. Giving them the opportunity to put your work out there and have the opportunity to make people aware that you are there. That's something we like to do, and we also like to read the books, new books, which we usually wouldn't have found if people haven't contacted us. Because let's be honest, there is only so much you can find on your own on Amazon. And when you're looking for books, to be quite honest. And I have to ask you, because it's also in your notes that were sent to me, and it was a bit disturbing, the question of the flamingos.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm not, I have to talk about it because I want people to pick up the book. But yes, Lash, the hero of the novel, finds herself pitted against genetically modified carnivorous, that is, flesh-eating flamingos. And I don't know. I just felt like there was a couple of sources of inspiration for that. The 1980s movie Sheena, starring Tanya Roberts, the jungle
Yeah.
uh, queen of that novel, telepathically summons flamingos to attack the bad guy at the end of the movie, which made an impression on me when I was 10 years old. I was like, wow, using flamingos as a weapon is very
Okay.
interesting. And then, of course, Thomas Harris's, famous flesh-eating pigs in, I think the book was called Hannibal.
Okay.
So I kind of put those two ideas together, mashed them up, and devised what I think is a very interesting, level, to use video game speak, a very interesting level for Lash to conquer before she beats the final boss,
Yeah,
which is
yeah. Also,
the evil. Go ahead.
That boss, now that you mention it, it hasn't occurred to me before, but now that you mention her, and in combination with this flamingos and flesh eating and so on, and remembering what she looks like or how Lash describes her, it reminds me a tiny bit of another character in the books by Kate Griffin. I absolutely love her books, her Kitty Beck books, where there is this female crime lord or lady, let's call her that, and she's also scary. And she's old and she's scary and so on. And the way she looks, I mean, she's on her deathbed at the end of one of the novels, and she smokes a lot of drugs and Lady Ginger she's called, and that's a bit what she reminds me of. So this combination is also fantastic. Like you said, flamingos and pigs. I mean, as far as I know, pigs are omnivores. So we should think about that.
Yeah. For me, it was just throwing as many fun things as I could into a story that, it's one of, I felt like writing science fiction about a dystopian Las Vegas was like being in a candy shop. I could just grab, I felt like I could grab anything: showgirls, flamingos, magicians, casinos, just everything. Las Vegas is such a playground, and then when you break it a little bit, then it's like you have even more toys. So that was the real pleasure of it. I didn't stop to think like, okay, well, how legitimately, how could you devise, where would you get the technology to genetically modify the flamingos? I just threw it in there, thinking, let's have fun with it, and I won't, provide all this information on the genetic modification of the aviary. But I had so much fun writing this novel that I'd love to write a sequel or two more parts to it to make it a proper trilogy. I've got those books outlined, but
Splendid.
All I need is this book to enjoy a bit of success to kind of merit that endeavor.
Yeah, because that would have been the question I meant to ask right at the beginning when we started our conversation. Is there or will there be a sequel? Because I would definitely love a sequel.
Well, I have them outlined, mapped out. It's just I just don't want to be that person that writes 3 books and they just sit on his, hard drive, sits in his cloud or whatever. I wanted there to be a reason to write the second and third one, and that reason has to be demand, if the book enjoys enough, if there are enough Ediths out there, I can sit down and carve out some new adventures for Lash. But I will say this: I do have a a vision of sending Lash to another planet to kill drones, maybe Mars or, you know, it's like these guys like Elon Musk always want to go to Mars, and I would love to send Lash there to destroy all their toys.
Make sure he can't return, maybe even.
Yeah. I think it'd be fun to introduce a kind of stand-in for Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, or in one of these sequels to the novel. I think that there could be a lot of fun in that. A lot of tongue-in-cheek fun.
Oh yeah, and he could take some of those, annoying politicians with him. Maybe why not?
Yeah, that was the thing too about Hammer of the Dogs, is like it's a bit almost apolitical because all the politicians have been killed. That they're in the other part of they're in the northeast side of the country, but it was fun to explore Vegas sort of with the politics ripped out and just kind of raw ideological forces in conflict. That made it in many ways kind of more satisfying.
Isn't it also usually, maybe I'm completely wrong, but isn't it usually also the idea with those books and stories and TV shows that we love so much, like, for example, The Last of Us, or even The Walking Dead? No politicians, although there is one or the other politicians in the show, but still, people have to organize themselves, have to find a way to build a community without those political,
right. And it's a scary
people.
proposition.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that's where a lot of the tension and the drama of Hammer of the Dogs, how it's generated is from that tension. Trying to make a life for yourself when everything is broken and nothing will be fixed and nothing will be, the roads will not be paved or remade. Water is scarce, resources are limited. I think that's a very frightening prospect because, we rely on government, we rely on essentially politics to handle those issues. And when everything is stripped away, I mean, what is left?
Yeah.
What can you do to, ensure survival? And Lash is willing to do a lot of things that, she knows is questionable, but she doesn't really have any other option.
Yeah.
She has to make the decisions that for many of us would be impossible. But that's so much fun to explore a character that way.
Yeah,
I got
absolutely.
I got a lot out of it. I feel like she taught me more than I was able to. I couldn't really manage the character Lash. The character Lash escaped my control, and I found myself really just almost taking orders from her rather than controlling, what she did. I really had no say. And I found that to be very metaphysical and liberating because I was always a little cynical about people who said, my character just took on a life of their own. And I was always like, you're the author, you're supposed to have control. But I found that what happened was, the opposite. I lost control. And I didn't think that would happen. And here I was eating my own words. I had told people for years that the author is, always the most powerful person on the page, force on the page. But lo and behold, this character, like I said, metaphysically, almost religiously motivated me to build this world, this story for her. And then she just went nuts within it.
Yeah, but isn't that the best way to write a book then?
Yes. And I had to learn that. She had to teach me that. But again, if you had told me 5 or 6 years ago that this is what happens, I would have doubted you. I would have said no chance. But, once again, I was wrong. And that's why writing and creativity, imagination are so important, because you learn from these things. You learn that things are not as cut and dry as you think they are. Things are more complicated, more nuanced always than what you believe them to be before you embark on a journey.
Absolutely agree. And since you mentioned creativity and ideas and so on, shouldn't we come back then to the joy of reading?
Yes. And, the joy of reading is why I became an English major, why I became a professor. And I don't see any reason why we have to teach them to not enjoy the books, and just calling them texts. That very act of calling a book a text to me is a bit inhuman. I don't read texts. I don't know who does. I read stories. I read poems. I read novels. I read books. That's what I prefer to call them.
Yeah.
And I don't analyze them. I don't want to analyze them. I want to enjoy them. I want to be moved by them. I want to be enriched by them. I want to be changed by them. I don't want a book to confirm all my biases and all my politics and all my garbage. I want a book to affect me in a real and human way, make me think about the world truly differently, not in that same, cookie cutter way, where this is right and this is wrong.
Yeah.
I want a book to challenge me, and not like, I don't want a book to beat me up or or be rude to me, but I do want a book to challenge me and make me think differently, or at least present possibilities to me that I hadn't considered. And that's what I hope I'm doing with Hammer of the Dogs, which is to show that technology, there are two ways to look at it, and sometimes you have to make a choice.
Yep.
And Lash makes the choice that works for her and her people and her friends and her family.
Yeah.
The choice she has to make to protect them.
Yeah.
And that's why I wrote the book. I didn't write the book for any other reason. I didn't write it to be famous or or make money. I wrote it to maybe dazzle and delight, whoever can find it, pick it up, and maybe affect them in the way that those 80s entertainments that I mentioned before affected and impacted me.
Yeah. I fully understand and I agree with you, because I don't know, I didn't mention it before. I mentioned it yesterday in my conversation with Caroline. This writing for the markets, I find it astonishing. On the one hand, I do understand why authors do that. On the other hand, I find it a bit sad.
Yes. Well, I don't think. I don't think Stephen King wrote for the market. I think they found a way to make his early novels work within the market. They changed the market to a degree to make it acceptable for his work to appear there and find purchase, to find success.
Yeah.
And that's kind of harder. That's harder to do now. But at the same time, as I mentioned before, my students are finding success undreamed of just a decade ago with this online publishing approach.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to tell them otherwise. I'm not going to tell them not to sell their novels on the Amazon marketplace so they can write more like the commercial market, or to I love Barnes and Noble, and I love I still buy books at the grocery store, Westerns and whatnot. But I'm not going to write a book for Albert for a grocery chain or for Barnes and Noble. I want to write the book that I see is missing in the world, and that I think the world would benefit from seeing on the shelf.
Yeah, but also probably very likely because you have to. This compulsion. Yes. There is, isn't it? I mean, there is this compulsion in people who sit down and write a story, write a book, write a short story, because there is this compulsion. They have to do it because they have to get it out of their head.
Yeah, it's a beautiful madness, and I succumb to it. I have succumbed to it, and I love it to a degree. It's a thing that you have to very likely, be aware of and manage like anything else. But I love it. I love to be lost in the creation process, in the creative, those creative moments. There's a real reward and mystery to it, because you don't know until you do it, until you finish it. Is this going to work?
Yeah.
And chances are, if you bring it to fruition, if you get to the end, it will work for you. But there are those moments when you're halfway through a book, a novel, or even a story, even a poem. You're like, is this going to work? Am I going to be able to pull this off? I've got all these things. I'm juggling all these things in the air, so to speak. And how do I make them land correctly? and that's that's the fear, that's the anxiety you have to push past, push beyond, keep writing and working your way to the conclusion, and I think it has always rewarded me. I mean, I haven't made a ton of money, pushing my way to the end of a book or a story, or a poem. But when I get there, I've always found, success. I've been able to get it published.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's read it. Somebody's provided a response, feedback, and that's worth it. To me, that's worth it, to make a connection like that with another human, other people, is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And given all that, what would be your advice for others, for other people who would want to get their labors of love out there?
Yeah, well, it's what we spoke about earlier, and your other guests have certainly discussed it too, which is the community aspect of it. Finding a local community, a nearby group of writers who you can actually meet. If it's not face to face, then through the internet. But I always go to for example, Las Vegas Book Festival here in our city, and it's just wonderful. It's an annual gathering of local literary people with national headliners, international authors coming to visit, read, give talks, workshops, and it's simply remarkable. And there's one in most big cities, and you can always get there, drive, take a plane, train, automobile to where you need to go to enjoy these gatherings. We have literary gatherings all the time, conferences and conventions here in Las Vegas, and even something as goofy as, not goofy, but as wonderful as a comic book convention or a romance writing convention. Those are where you really find, if you're drilling down into your niche, into your, genre, those are the best places to meet people.
That's absolutely true. But rumor has it, romance authors are dangerous people, whereas crime fiction authors are a lot of fun.
I don't know anything. I don't know if that's true. I love crime fiction. I edited a book of crime fiction called Las Vegas Noir for Akashic Books, and it was a hoot. I love writing crime fiction set in Las Vegas, but I also love romance, and I love the idea of a romantic plot or subplot, and that's what. In fact, it was my reading of romance that pushed me to include or incorporate what you might call a romance subplot between Lash and Richter. I just found that dynamic to be missing in a lot of so-called literary science fiction. As I said, literary science fiction, it seems to always be sociological. Romance is an afterthought. It's all about power and oppression and all that, which is interesting. But I wanted to try my hand at something, a little more delightful, a little more sweet. And so, in a world that's as messed up as Lash's dystopian Las Vegas, I thought it'd be fun to bring in some sweetness, some light, some levity, some humor, some I don't know, some romance, and that's what I set out to do.
Yeah, make it a bit more lighthearted, probably, because usually when, like you said, oh, it's all about problems and it's so hard and what not, and please, just come on.
I mean, I love Handmaid's Tale and all that, but I also like stuff that is maybe not so heavy and not so sinister, and I think we can write all kinds of stories and not just the one, and so that's what I set out to do with Hammer of the Dogs. And there's even romance if you look for it in Terminator, especially the first film.
Oh yeah,
there's a romantic subplot that is very sweet and very strange, but very, very compelling, and it makes it for me the superior movie over the second Terminator film, which lacked that romance spark. And so I think of the second Terminator movie as being not quite as good because it lacks that romance subplot. And then the Aliens franchise, I have not been able to identify much if any, romance in that movie, but in that franchise. But I think it'd be cool to add something of it to it. And I think there's a little bit in Alien 3, the third Alien movie. There's a bit of romance.
Yeah, although I was never keen on Alien 3, but you're right, of course. There is this little tidbit of romance. There.
But I think they kill him. I think they kill him off.
Yeah. No, they kill everybody off. I think in this one, that's why. Well, number 4 was a bit strange, but still good. But if you're looking for romance in Alien, you might have to look at fan fiction.
Yes, which is a whole other can of worms.
Oh yes, and it's not even that you could say that those people write bad stories, because I've read fan fiction that is great, even sometimes better than what you find in the bookshop. I'm not talking about 50 Shades of Boredom, of course,
right,
which we pretend has never happened. But
No, my students, before they became Amazon novelists or whatever to call it, they cut their teeth doing fan fiction, as teenagers.
Yeah.
And that's how they learned.
It's huge.
And some people never left that. They write that into their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. They keep going.
Yep.
Because they love it so much, and they love the idea and the process of it.
Absolutely. And there are TV shows who have a close look on what the fans want. And I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but Melissa Good is one of the fan fiction authors of Xena. And she wrote for 1 or 2 episodes of the TV show.
Yeah, I'd read that.
Yeah.
But what a great character that is. That's another character. I mean, that's from the 90s, but we all grew up with Xena and Buffy and can't.
Yep.
To me, that is how you're supposed to do science fiction fantasy. What is it? Mulder and
Scully.
That's to me ideal. That's how genre writing, at least for television, is supposed to be done.
And Gillian Anderson is a really good actress, by the way. So.
Oh yes, without a doubt. Yes.
Yeah, I've seen her in the theater. I've seen her live in the theater. Yeah, I had the pleasure once.
Yeah. Do you remember the production? Do you know what it was?
All About Eve.
Oh, terrific.
Where I saw her live, and I saw her in another production. This was a live stream from the National Theatre. It was a Streetcar Named Desire, and she was incredible. She really was.
Yeah. What an incredible play. I bet that was amazing to witness.
Yeah, absolutely. And what they did with the stage, it was also terrific, and her acting was outstanding. Absolutely.
Well, I have to tell you one more thing about, since we're on the subject of live theater. I really see Hammer of the Dogs being adapted into a musical rather than a film. I would love to witness Hammer of the Dogs become a proper musical in the style of West Side Story or
interesting,
or Phantom of the Opera.
Okay,
because I did steal a bit from both to create some of these characters. There's a bit of the Phantom, obviously, in Richter. And with West Side Story, you have the competing gangs. So I put a lot of that of those notions into the story, and I would love to help compose songs, music and lyrics for Hammer of the Dogs. It's there's so much 80s hard rock and heavy metal throughout the novel that I wanted to I can easily see this as being kind of like what do you call a rock musical in the style of like Tommy or something like that. I would love to. Little Shop of Horrors was a big deal for me growing up in the 80s. I starred in a production of Little Shop of Horrors in my high school, musical guild, which was a lot of fun. And I don't know, there's something about the musical that is just still endures. It's still, it satisfies audiences. And, except for maybe the movie version of Cats. Nobody liked that. But
let's pretend again that it never happened.
I saw Cats live like in the 80s in Florida. And I loved it. I was young. This idea of the musical, I think it endures, and I think there needs to be more done with it, especially in terms of genre. Sci-fi, fantasy, horror musicals. I think are really fun, really cool.
Oh yeah, it would be interesting. So for any producer out there who has been listening to our conversation, please, exactly, contact my guest, and you have your plot.
I'll even write the songs for free. Let's do it.
See, there you go. You're always looking for something new. There you have it. Absolutely. And Jarret, you elaborated a little bit on your plans. So there are hopefully plans for book number 2, number 3. What can we look forward to from you in the near future?
Other projects that I'm working on. I'm writing a Western trilogy that will be out, I guess, starting in the fall of this year. And that stars a hero I've created named Kid Crimson, who is the youngest, handsomest railroad stage agent in Virginia City, Nevada, which is a mining town in the 1860s. And he does some special jobs for the federal government, for the Pinkertons and other agencies. And it's a story of a young man who has gone west in the U.S. and is trying to establish himself, or at least make enough money to escape to buy a citrus farm in California. And so that trilogy is very action-packed, but also has a lot of these strong romance elements that we talked about earlier. So I'm hoping that it'll be a success. But this series is different. Well, it's a series, so this is a lot more fun, but also intensive. I've written the first 2 books, and I'm finishing up the 3rd one now. So I'm looking forward to seeing how audiences, how readers react to Kid Crimson, the gunfighter for hire in the 1860s mining town in Western Nevada. I think it'll be fun.
Sounds intriguing. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Jarret, is there anything else you would like our listeners to know?
No, just please follow me on Instagram and what are the X, Facebook. I'm everywhere over on those platforms, and I also have a website, jarretkeene.net. And if you do get a chance to read Hammer of the Dogs, send me an email. Let me know what you think. I'd love to get feedback from your audience.
I loved it.
Well, thank you. Thanks for that endorsement.
Want another one?
Yes, it's coming.
It's wonderful to hear. Absolutely looking forward to more from you. So, Jarret, thank you so much for joining me. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Yes, let's do it again soon. I love chatting with you.
Yep, absolutely. Just drop me a line and we'll find a date and a time. You did enjoy this episode as much as we did? Then hit subscribe and don't miss the next episode. Also, make sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. If you like to support us and buy us a coffee, you can do so via Buy Me a Coffee and other platforms. You can find all the necessary links in the description. Until next time.